Good morning, everybody. We will get started here in just about 1 minute. Good morning, everybody. It's good to see you. It is morning here in the American Midwest. I'm not sure what time it is where you are, but thanks for joining us today. My name is Dean Barker, and I am the Global Director of Content Management at Optimizely. And I am joined today by Anthony Iosa. Anthony, say hi.
Hey there.
Anthony is the Director of Product Marketing at Welcome Software. And you may have heard Optimizely acquired Welcome earlier this year. And we're very, very excited about this. And so this is the first time that Anthony and I have had a chance to do a webinar together. And what we're going to be talking about today is we're going to be talking about content processes in general. In particular, I'm going to be talking about where content comes from, just to kind of frame the discussion. And in particular, talk about how our relationship with Welcome came about and how it's affected my thinking. I specialize in content management, but this experience has really changed how I think about content. Anthony's going to talk for a bit, and then he's going to do a demo. He's going to show you the actual product and how a CMP like Welcome works. And then I would encourage you to stay to the end, because Anthony actually has some very big news to tell you at the end of this call. So what I'm going to do is just kind of frame this discussion for just about 10 minutes to talk in particular my journey of coming to understand about CMP and how it affected how I think about content. This is the question that I've been asking myself a lot lately. When we started looking into the CMP market as a company, maybe 18 months ago, I was kind of introduced to this world of software platforms that really forced me to take stock of what I thought about content processes and where content starts. I've been working in content management now for about 25 years. That's been my experience. And I had a very content management focused view of content and content processes. And I've come to understand that that's limiting. That's not really how I should have been looking at it. And this is maybe, it's going to seem like I'm going out on a limb, but at the same time, I was reading this book. This book is called The Seine, the River That Made Paris. It's about the Seine, which is the river that flows through France. I don't even know how I ended up with this book. I think it was like buy two, get one free at Barnes & Noble. And I ended up with this book. But I was reading this book at the time, and it was a lovely book. And it's about this river, the River Seine, that floats through France. And when you think about the River Seine, what do you think about? I mean, you think about things like this, right? This is as it flows through Paris. I'm embarrassed to say I don't know what the building in the background is, but that's the famous building in Paris, right? The Seine floats through Paris. This is one of the famous bridges. There's 38 bridges over the Seine. Or you think about things like this. This is the Seine actually as it floats past Notre Dame. And then here's a picture that I took. I was stuck in Paris once for 18 hours. Air France went on strike, which I understand happens a lot. And I was determined to see the Eiffel Tower. So I literally took a cab all the way from De Gaulle, and I stayed at a hotel like 2 blocks away from the Eiffel Tower. And then I got up and I went for a run on the Eiffel Tower. I took this picture. There wasn't a lot of light here, which is why it's a little grainy. But I can say that I saw the Eiffel Tower in the dark for about 15 minutes. Very exciting. So, and if you do an image search for the Seine, this is what you see. You see a ton of pictures about the Seine as it floats through Paris. Every single picture has some Paris landmark in it. But when I was reading this book about the Seine, I came to understand that the Seine is about 500 miles long. Paris is a very sprawling city, but the Seine starts just northwest of Dijon, and then it ends when it empties into the Channel, and only about 8% of it floats through Paris. Paris, again, massive city, lots of suburbs, but I actually did the math, and I think about 8% of it flows through Paris. But when we look I picture the Seine, this is all we ever see is when the Seine is floating through Paris. I did some research and I found this, and this is the actual start of the Seine. This is about 30 miles northwest of Dijon. This is a picture right here of the spring in the ground. This water literally bubbling up from the ground becomes the Seine. And in the distance there, you see that footbridge next to the two people. That is technically the very first bridge over the Seine. And then the Seine floats for about 250 miles before it goes through Paris. And after it gets through Paris, it goes for another 100 miles or so after it ends out in the Channel. And you may be asking yourself, what in the world are you talking about? And this is why I have brought this up, because I think it very much relates to content processes. When we look at content processes, when we think of 0%, like when our content starts, and 100% when it ends, this is kind of what we think. We think it starts when we log into the CMS, and then it ends when we press publish, right? That's 0% to 100%. That's the entire process. And that's just not accurate. I maintain that really this is only about 15% of the entire life cycle of content production. I wrote a blog post about this 16 years ago. Thinking about I was blogging 16 years ago makes me contemplate my age. But this is the blog post called The First 85%. I wrote this back in 2006. And when we were talking to CMP platforms and Welcome in particular, this became something of a rallying cry, was this first 85%. And you can see I had a friend do this graphic, which was very advanced for me back in 2006. But I think the actual platform part where we enter a CMS is really just the first 85 or the last 15% of the process. The first 85% of the process, traditionally for me, someone who's content management centric, it really took place outside the CMS. So if we expand our view of content publication, right? So 0% is when we have an idea for content, not when we log into our CMS, but literally when we have the idea for content. And then we follow that process all the way through. And then 100% is when the content's finally published. I think it really looks like this. 85% of this is not in the CMS, and then 15% of it is in the CMS. Content management, really content publication, is a process that starts, like where does content begin? Literally starts when somebody has the idea for content. And previously, I've just looked at that 85% as being not CMS, but I've come to understand over the last 18 months, there are processes and platforms that are built to handle this first 85% of the process. Somebody said this. I think I may remember who said this, but I'm not sure. So I'm going to quote it anonymously. But the quote is that no one creates content in the CMS. They just edit it there. And this is someone who specializes in content management. It's a bit tragic for me because we envision our content management systems as handling the entire life cycle of content publication. But in reality, a lot of content starts taking shape, starts being formed and created outside of CMS. And then the CMS is just kind of the last stage of publication. So what we wanted to do at Optimizely is we kind of wanted to do that entire life cycle of content publication. And what could we do for that first 85%? So we looked at the entire life cycle of content publication, and we kind of started to diagram out how content comes together. There's all sorts of things that take place before you ever touch a CMS. You have these needs for content that are unexpressed, and then they're expressed, and you look at analytics and you do discussions about potential content, like how could we address this particular issue? You test fit various content angles. You may try to write a blog post, and like maybe this would be better as a video. You do a bunch of offline content production. Let's face it, a lot of content starts its life in Microsoft Word or in Google Docs. And then you do some informal review. You start mailing this document around and say, hey, everybody, what do you think about this? And then you kind of work through this content together. And then somebody logs into a CMS, and then you go through this formal processes where you produce the content, turn it into some kind of artifact. You have some formal review process, depending on what your CMS provides. And then you finally get to publication. And in my head, as we looked at these CMP platforms and went through this process, I kind of split these up into authoring and production. And I think those are really two different things. Some CMSs, and certainly our CMS is as competent as any, will handle the process of authoring and collaboration and production. But what I've come to understand is that there's an entire genre of software out there that really specializes in the authoring part of content. And really when CMS would manage the production. I teach a couple of university courses on CMS, and this is the 3-layer model I've always used to describe DXP. And for me, the bottom layer was always we manage content. And then we take that content and we produce it into artifacts. An artifact might be a web page, probably the most common one. And then, or we might do a social media update. A lot of different artifacts may stem from the same piece of content. And then from that, every time somebody consumes that artifact, we have an experience. We optimize those experiences. And Optimizely, the company, really handles all 3 layers of this stack. We allow you to manage the content, produce artifacts, and then optimize those experiences. But I've come to understand that I was missing a layer, and my 3-layer stack has really turned into a 4-layer now. I understand that underneath the managing of the content prior to that is this whole entire world of capturing and collaborating on ideas. It's ideas that really become content. Content becomes artifact, and artifact becomes experience. So this process of working with Welcome over this last year has really expanded my view from 3 layers of DXP into 4 layers. I'm not sure how many of you remember this book. This book was written in 2009 by Christina Halverson and Melissa Rock, both fellow Midwesterners. Christina is a friend. She's spoken at one of my conferences, but this was the seminal book on content strategy. Content strategy has been around forever. Content strategy has been around as long as we've been thinking about content, but it was never really codified. It was never really written down or given a formal name until Christina and Melissa wrote this book in 2009. And what I'm excited to say is that CMP platforms really are the software tool for content strategists. If you're involved in content planning or content strategy, there is a tool for you. And that's the content marketing platform, of which Welcome is a great example. And what I want to conclude by saying is that good content isn't magic. And we think that it is. And if you're a content strategist, one of your great frustrations is probably your organization thinks content is magic. There's a scene from Avengers Endgame I always think about. This is how people think content happens. Some portal opens up into the creative void and content just comes walking out. And that's how content happens. It's the easiest thing in the world. And if you're a content strategist, you know that that's not true. Effective content really begins with a systematic approach to capture ideas, develop those ideas, and execute a collaborative editorial process to turn ideas into content. Remember, my 3-layer model of DXP has really turned into 4 layers. We manage content, but we really need to capture and collaborate on ideas, and that's what CMP platforms do. You build these content processes by using a content ideation and collaboration platform. Welcome is a fantastic one, and Anthony is going to show you that. I just want to say that when you think about your content, I want you to think about the same. And I want you to think about it and think, am I only thinking about my content as it goes through my CMS? Am I only thinking about the Seine as it floats through Paris? Because if you're doing that, you may be missing out on this much larger idea of the genesis of your content and the journey that your content takes on the way to your CMS. And I would encourage you to kind of step back as Anthony talks and shows our product and take a look at the entire process of content and ask yourself, the content I work with, where does that content begin? Do I have a systematic process, or does content just some magic portal that it steps out of? And so I'm going to now turn it over to Anthony. Anthony is going to talk a bit more, and then he's going to show you a demo of our product. And again, he has some very, very exciting news at the end of the presentation. Anthony, it's all yours.
Awesome. Thank you, Dean. And I have to say, when you dropped that picture of the Eiffel Tower into the deck, I had no idea that you took it. So
it is my one great claim to fame. I took a picture of the Eiffel Tower over the Seine. It's the most French picture I could ever take, I think. I should have been holding like a baguette or something.
Yeah, that would have been it. Skilled photographer, published author, part-time professor. The list goes on. I love it. Adding.
I'm going to put skilled in air quotes there.
Yeah. Subjective. All right. Well, thank you, Dean. That was a perfect way to set the table. I'm excited to talk to you. I just have a few slides, then we will get into the meat of it and show you guys the good stuff in the platform. But I wanted to build on a little bit of what Dean was saying and share some of the specific challenges that we hear our customers citing all the time, and then share a couple of best practices that we see our team and some of the better marketing organizations out there leveraging and employing in the context of their content production, as Dean said. So really quick, I won't drain this slide, but I wanted to call this out. So in December of 2021, we administered a survey, and we focused, we targeted content marketers, content strategists, content ops, and a lot of different marketing functions where content creation and content production was at the core of what they do. And you'll see we covered a wide variety of verticals across all different sizes of companies. And, our goal was really just to understand what gets in the way of developing exceptional content and being able to get it out the door to their customers, to their audiences. So Dean, next slide. What we asked these respondents to do is classify themselves into one of these buckets. These are stages of maturity that they kind of self-identified their organization with. And it ranged from all the way on the left, ad hoc, a lot of what Dean was talking about, right? No formal process. Things happen very manually. they weren't really leveraging any purpose-built technology. Maybe they're still in email, all the way to advanced, right? Where teams had sophisticated processes, they were able to scale, and they had a really well integrated tech stack that it was able to help facilitate all of that. If you advance to the next slide, you'll see what we found as people started to self-identify was the majority of folks found themselves somewhere in the middle, which, isn't terrible, but also not as good as it could be. And on the next slide, what we have are the top challenges that were cited that came out of that survey. So I found this kind of eye-opening because when you take a step back, you think, well, these are like fairly, fundamental things that we as product marketers, content marketers, we should have, from a planning standpoint, do we just have the shared visibility across, different creators and different teams within our organization? From a production standpoint, do we have the right workflows and processes in place that are going to help us scale? Even from an asset management standpoint, how are we thinking about ways to leverage the content that we're already producing and minimize the waste? Next slide, please, Dean. And so, as I, and so that those survey results, again, I didn't, there's a lot more detail there. We've published it. It's available for free. You don't even have to fill out a form. Just go to welcomesoftware.com and you can download it. But my key takeaway was, wow, like a lot of those top challenges are exactly what Dean just kind of walked us through and what Dean's been talking about for over 10 years now, right? It was really all rooted in that first 85%.
I got a royalty payment for this, right? Using the first 85%.
Every time I plug it. Yes.
I've trademarked it, so thank you. Just put a TM after it. Thank you.
Somewhere, somebody out there's got the first 85% and an anonymous citing, and Dean is going to roll over. But so yeah, I mean, this, I think, my takeaway was that, as we look at this bubble, right, I think the perfectionist in all of us as content creators, content marketers, content strategists, we are so focused on, the output, and we're so focused on creating exceptional content and delivering what is an exceptional customer experience, right? That's the blue. But we forget about the purple. And the purple is really the marketer experience. It's everything that we as marketers, we as teammates, it's what we all need to do together collectively in order to deliver an exceptional blue outcome. So I think with that, let me start sharing my screen, please. Seamless transition. All right, wonderful. And I'm actually going to start in maybe a way you wouldn't expect, but I've logged into the Welcome platform here. Along the left-hand side are all of the core modules of the tool, from our ideation capabilities to our web and content analytics to our calendaring. I'll touch on a couple of these very high level, but I actually wanted to start with the library, which is our native and fully integrated digital asset manager. And you may be wondering, well, what is this and how is it relevant? What the DAM is a collection of all of the assets that have gone through a workflow. It is that 15%, right, that Dean was talking about. As you can see in our DAM, we've got a wide variety of different assets across a bunch of different file formats, whether it's images or PDFs, infographics, multimedia, including video, web articles, the list goes on. And when I click into each one of these, you can see the associated metadata attached with each. I can see who the owner is, I can see who it was shared to. And as I scroll down, I've also got the lineage associated with it. So I can see where it originated from in terms of what content or campaign it was part of originally, and where it maybe had been reused or repurposed by a different line of business or a different market. I can also see all of the metadata that's associated with it. Now, this is important because as I want to leverage this metadata, I can quickly surface and discover and ultimately repurpose any asset that's in the dam. Now, I bring this up and it's maybe a little counterintuitive to what you would think, but I bring that up because all of these files, all of these assets that our team is collectively producing, they don't just live here in the digital asset manager, they also live in the, in our CMS. And so here, this is, Optimizely Content Cloud. What I've got is a file picker where I can browse all of those assets that we just saw in the welcome dam and just easily drag and drop these things onto the page in order to produce the content. Now, again, you might be thinking, well, why did you start at kind of the end of the asset lifecycle, right? And that's because I wanted to context set and show you, well, that's the end of the river, right? And this is the start of it. When our team begins to plan, it's really important to have all of the shared visibility that we need across all of the different content that we're producing and all of the different campaigns that we're running. So in Welcome, because everything is fully integrated, we've got calendaring functionality and collaborative editors that help us produce all of that. So here in the plan module, you can see all of the different campaigns we're running across different products and different regions. And this gives us an easy way to visualize things long-term. But if I click into more of a granular tactical calendar, I can actually see those specific content assets that we're producing and how they're being produced. So all of these things on the calendar are different content artifacts that are going out, and you can actually see where and to which channel they're being pushed to. So this is critical, right? Because as our team grows, as our team scales, now we've got that cross-team visibility to not only repurpose things that already exist, but we have kind of that proactive, we have the foresight to know what's coming down the pipe and how do we cross-promote, how do we cross-amplify all of that work. Now, again, just to bring this all together and to bring it home a little bit, it's not just about, it's not just about the planning piece of it. We need to be able to facilitate the processes that go into developing each one of these. And so if I'm just going to pick one here. If I click into, the toolbar that I need to move. If I click into one of these, it's not just a tile on a calendar. Everything that we saw on that calendar is a real asset moving through a real workflow. And so you can see creative that our team has built. You can actually see the article and the asset that is ultimately going to get pushed to our CMS. So here's the creative with a long form article, a lot of copy. All of this is moving through a predefined and very structured workflow. So we've got the right folks at the right stage of the process coming into the platform to help facilitate the creation of this asset. And as it moves through, as people come in to approve it, it gets pushed to it gets added to the CMS just with the click of a button, right? And it's not just the CMS; it's all of our channels, whether it's social or other. So again, very high level. I want to leave a few minutes for Q&A, but hopefully that gives you a sense of why it's so critical to have a platform that centralizes where the planning happens, where the collaboration happens, and ultimately where you can govern the final output of all of that work, not just for one-time use, but really to hopefully maximize reuse and maximize the shelf life of all those assets that you're producing. So with that, let me toggle back to the deck here. Got a couple of closing slides. Let's see, hopefully this does not start from the beginning. Of course it does. You know what? I'm going to just exit out and I'll share it directly from here. So, this is what we looked at in, I did not do it justice, but in the 5 minutes that I had, I wanted to kind of, demonstrate how Welcome has been designed, initially as a content marketing platform that has now built in a native and fully integrated digital asset manager. And it's designed to help teams, content teams and marketing teams facilitate that and orchestrate that entire content production life cycle and the campaign life cycle, right? From planning to the creation to the storage of assets and ultimately the distribution of that content. And that's what we like to call the marketer experience at Optimizely. It's this entire left-hand side. It's a lot of that first 85% that Dean talked about, where now together with Optimizely, and the reason why these two product sets are so complementary is our ability to facilitate or to enable teams to facilitate that entire creation process and distribute it down to their CMS and other systems for publishing, for testing, for experimentation and optimization, now together being complemented with the Optimizely product suite. As we promised, I wanted to, I'd be remiss if as a marketer, as a product marketer for Welcome, I didn't at least mention this. This report is hot off the press. And when I say that, I don't even think those words do it justice. Gartner just released this less than an hour ago. So the Magic Quadrant for content marketing platforms, it was just released an hour ago. If you visit our site, I'm sure one of my awesome colleagues will drop the link into the chat now. But check it out, download it, a complimentary copy on us. It's highly relevant because it talks a lot about the capabilities that Dean alluded to up front, ways to facilitate the first 85%. So please do check it out. Please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions. And actually, if you visit us at welcomesoftware.com, you can try the tool for free. We open it up and we offer it entirely free for small teams, so you can get started even today. With that, Dean, back over to you. Any questions from the crowd?
Just one question. When you look at Welcome, when you're developing Welcome as a product, what's your target audience? What's really the target user audience that actually is in the product every single day?
Yeah. So historically, certainly content marketers, content strategists, for those that are not familiar, Welcome was formerly NewsCred and, the longtime leader in the CMP category. But, as we think about that first 85%, we found that first 85% applies to more than just content teams, and it applies to marketing functions really across the board that need help governing that content production process, regardless of content type or content format. So, and the other thing, role and persona aside, function aside, I would say teams of all sizes, right? Like the inflection point for us really starts at, when you become a team of at least 10, maybe a dozen, maybe 10 to 15, you need to start thinking about ways to formalize this process as you start to have more collaborators coming together. So hopefully that helps.
And just one other question is, how does Welcome intersect with like Teams and Slack and other collaboration channels? Is it used instead of those or alongside those or with those?
In addition to, yeah, so we already have an integration with Slack. You can download that from the Slack, app directory. The Teams integration, I believe, is slated for next quarter. Collaboration tools like that, we integrate from a notification standpoint, but the reason why Welcome's different is because it's really facilitating the content production, right? So folks are going into Welcome to, deliver on their part of the workflow as it relates to content creation. So no more email back and forth, for example, or files getting lost out in the ether. We're able to centralize where all of the work actually happens, all of the content creation actually happens.
Well, that's fantastic. I think we nailed the time. We are right at time, so we're going to call it here. We want to thank everybody for attending. There was one question we didn't get to. I know the asker personally. I'll reach out to him directly. But thank you very much for joining us today. And there is a link in the chat for the Gartner report. And as Anthony said, if you go to welcomesoftware.com, you can try the software out yourself. That's all we had. Thanks anybody for joining today. We'll talk again next time.
Thanks all. Bye-bye.